Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy Meyer and today I'm going to be discussing our word problem analysis project. So for our word problem assignment, I created 4 math questions, and these were all word problems that were geared towards first grade. So I had a first grader complete the questions, and I also had an adult complete the questions. And this presentation is going to be about analyzing how the student and adult differed in their methods for solving the questions, and also how they were similar, and also if they arrived at the right answers. So the questions that I created were based on subtraction, addition, and really just understanding place value. So the standards that I used to really come up with these questions, the first one talks about using addition and subtraction within 20 to solve word problems involving situations of adding to, taking from, putting together, taking apart, and comparing. The next standard that I used was understanding that the 2 digits of a 2-digit number represent amounts of tens and ones. And following this standard, 2 substandards that I used were, the first one, 10 can be thought as a bundle of 10 ones called a 10. And the other one is the numbers from 11 to 19 are composed of a 10 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 ones. So overall, these questions were really geared towards understanding place value with addition and subtraction questions. So the first question is the following. Maria and Steve are playing basketball. Maria's points are 2 ones and 1 tens. Steve's points are 2 tens and 4 ones. Who has more points? So the first question is definitely understanding place value. So whoever the person is, whether a student or an adult, has to understand how ones and tens are 2 different place values and understanding how to create numbers based on the place values and comparing those numbers. So the second question is the following. You are walking home from a friend's house with 15 crayons in your backpack. If your backpack has a hole and you lose 6 crayons along the way, how many do you have left? So whoever solves this, whether again a student or an adult, they have to understand that number one, this is a subtraction question, and they have to understand how to take 15 and subtract it from 6 and get their final answer. And I also had a sub-question within this big problem, which is to draw a picture of how many crayons you have left. So I included this second part of the question because I know that a lot of people like to have a visual representation of what they're doing, so maybe having them draw the crayons might help them solve the question. So the next question is, Miss Chrissy is helping you with your math homework. If she places these cubes on the table, how many cubes are there? So for this question, I really wanted the person solving this to see a visual representation of what I am asking, and I decided to use base 10 blocks. So I really wanted to see if the student or the adult, number one, knows what these are, and number two, knows how to solve this question without simply adding every single individual cube. So the last question is, Samantha and Nick went to the candy store. If Samantha bought 25 Hershey's and Nick bought 43 Kit Kat bars, which number is greater? And then did the tens or the ones help you decide? So this is really getting at place value and understanding numbers that are greater than, less than, or equal to each other. So let's first look at the student analysis. So one student who completed these questions, his name is Taka, and he is in first grade. So when I gave him these questions, I did not help him at all. The only thing I did was read the question to him to make sure that he understood all the vocabulary that was used. So while I was observing him solving these questions, I first noticed that he really understood that this was a place value question. He used the line and dot model, which you can see, or base 10 blocks, whichever model that you choose. He used kind of both of those to really show that the 2 10s and the 4 1s for Steve's points equaled 24, while Maria's 2 1s and 1 10s was 12. So then he drew 2 separate boxes. You could see how he was trying to separate the 2 types of points, and then he compared it, and he said that Steve had more points, which is correct. So for the second question, what I really saw was that, number one, he really understood the question. He knew immediately that this was a subtraction question, and he understood the whole part diagram, which is basically the whole, which represents 15, and you're taking away a part, which would be 6, and you would be left with another part. So how he tried to solve this question was that he again kind of drew base 10 blocks, and he put X's to illustrate that he was taking part of that whole away. So he eventually got the answer, which is 9, which is correct, and he also drew circles to represent crayons. So even though he wasn't really quite sure how to draw crayons, he still used some type of visual to understand how to solve this question. So for the third question, he actually told me that this was his favorite question because he really likes using 10 base blocks, and he said it was his favorite math manipulative. So for this question, he was given the visual, and he actually wrote out an explanation for the answer. So he figured out that there was 1 10s and 5 1s, which equals 15. So he really understands the idea of 10s and 1s in regards to place value, and he also used an invented strategy. So the strategy that he specifically used for this question is add 10s, add 1s, and then combine. Because what he first did was he figured out there was 1 10s, then he figured out there was 5 1s, and then he combined them to get the right answer, which was 15. So for the last question, Taka really understood that this was a place value question, and he understood that he was going to have to compare 2 different numbers. So he used the line and dot diagram, or he also drew base 10 blocks, to compare Nick's 43 Kit Kat bars with Samantha's 25 Hershey's, and he discovered that Nick's 43 Kit Kat bars, the number 43, is greater than 25. Now for the second part of the question, he also understood that the 10s helped him decide, which really meant that he understood that 25, 2 is in the 10s place, and for 43, 4 is in the 10s place, and 4 is greater than 2, so the 10s helped him decide. So now that we've looked at a student's way of solving these questions, I really wanted to see how an adult's perspective on these questions would be different or be the same. So the adult that I found was named Jill. Now I really wanted to understand how she would solve these questions and how it would be similar or different from Taka. So after looking at the question, she definitely understood that this was a place value question. And she separated Maria and Steve's points, and she actually used an invented strategy for addition, which was to add the 10s, add the 1s, and then combine. So she added Maria's points, which were 2 1s, which is 2, and 1 10s, which is 10, and she added them to get 12. However, she did not use any manipulatives, and she did not write the addition sign, so some of it was mental math. So for the next question, I definitely saw a big change in how Jill tried to solve this question. So she understood that this was a subtraction problem, and she arrived at the right answer, but she did not show any work. So obviously she was using mental math. She did draw the crayons, but I would say that she definitely used the standard algorithm for subtraction, and she did not use any visual. She did not write out the equation. She just arrived at the correct answer. So for this third question, she arrived at the right answer, and how she solved this was first she counted up the number of purple cubes, and then she counted up the number of orange cubes, and then she added them together. So Jill did not really see a connection between the cubes and place value. So she didn't understand that these were base 10 blocks, and therefore the rod, which was orange, would represent 1/10, and the individual cubes, there are 5 of them, would represent 5 1s. And again, she used the standard algorithm for addition, which was just adding them together, and she didn't write any addition sign or anything like that, so some of it may have also been mental math. So for this last question, after reading the question, she understood that 43 is greater than 25, so she arrived at the right answer. However, for the second part, which was really to test whether you understand place value, she was really confused by it, and she actually asked me, "What do you mean by this?" And I didn't tell her anything because I really wanted to know how she would interpret the question. So she didn't really understand that for this question, you're really supposed to see how 43, 4 is in the tens place, and for 25, 2 is in the tens place, and 4 is greater than 2, so 43 is the greater number. So she didn't really understand the place value or the whole idea of it, so that was definitely very interesting to see. So after analyzing both the student and the adult way of solving these questions, I came up with some conclusions. So the student and the adult all showed different ways of solving the same question, and they all got all of the questions correct. So I saw Taka and Jill both use some invented and some standard algorithms. However, Taka really used a lot of manipulatives and diagrams and visual representations to solve these questions. So he drew out the 10 base blocks, he drew out the line dot diagram, and he really understood the whole idea of place value with addition and subtraction. On the other hand, Jill did not really understand the manipulatives or how to use them, and it's clear that she knows how to add and subtract, but I don't really feel that she understands how place value comes into play. I feel like also when she was taught math, it was more mental math, the old standard way of solving these questions. So that's definitely a consideration when comparing these two people. Taka is now in the new age of Common Core math, while Jill was in the old age of mental math and just the standard algorithm of solving addition and subtraction. So overall, I thought this was a very interesting project to see how students like Taka and how adults like Jill typically solve these questions, and I really enjoyed analyzing them. So I hope you enjoyed my little audio discussion of both the adult and student analysis. Thank you.